Why are we bombing Iran? I've been asked that question more times than I can count today, and instead of sitting down with the next guest and talking about it by the time it airs, who knows what's going on, I figured I'd jump on here for a little mic drop solo, just give you a quick soundbite of my take on it. No, I don't have a master's in geopolitics. I'm not a historian. For those of you that are or think I have no business sharing my opinion on it, feel free to stop now if I throw in something in the comment section to prove to everybody that you don't have anything better to do. Having said that, I think the broader context of about the last 40 years is crucial to look at. It's not a 30-second soundbite where you can just say, we're bombing Iran because they're close to having a nuke and it's the right thing to do. That's typically about all you hear. There needs to be a longer answer than that. And again, not looking back several millennia, going back to Persia and the rich history that region has from the 70s until present day is crucial to look at to really see how we've arrived at the scenario and situation that we look at today, where the Ayatollah is officially dead, the entire regime has collapsed, and the future is pretty unknown and uncertain for the country of Iran. So going back to the 70s, the Shah is very friendly and allied with the United States. It's a very Western-like culture. Growing sentiment, anti-U.S. sentiment, and feeling as though the Shah is a puppet of the United States, which he probably was. Grows and grows until finally they decide they've had enough, bunch of uprisings, and the Shah flees. The Ayatollah comes in. It's basically a cultural hard reset where it goes from being a very pro-Western type of society to a hardline Islamic religious dictatorship. Not long after that, a bunch of U.S. hostages are taken, tensions are high, Reagan jumps into office, that gets sorted out. Again, I'm abbreviating a lot of this, but I just want to give the broad context. The 80s roll around, Saddam decides he wants to invade, not real sure as to what the overarching intentions that he had at the time, but a bloody, bloody war between those two countries for most of the 80s. Incredibly catastrophic on both sides, but at the end of it, that's when Iraq, we end up getting into it with them. Iran kind of goes about its way. And it was also towards the end of the 80s where Hezbollah and then Hamas, the Houthis, et cetera, over the course of several decades are both born and funded and grow and act as proxy militias on behalf of Iran. Because of that, it's destabilized the entire region. And as you move through the 90s, you get into the 2000s, their interest in having a nuclear weapon and being what I think most people would consider a state sponsor of terror, is essentially objective number one. They continue to build on that. 2000s turn into the 2010s, 2015, 2020, and in that 2 decades, their influence in the region through their proxies, as well as the enrichment of nuclear material and what a lot of people in the West consider to be a threat, continue to grow and grow. A lot of tit for tat, a lot of little incursions in the Gulf, a lot of strikes and quick pot shot type of attacks from Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. It's kind of a constant cat and mouse, but the overarching theme is that they're growing into something that a lot of the West is more and more concerned about, and primarily as it relates to the United States, it's do they or will they have the capability to possess a nuclear weapon that also has the capacity from an intercontinental ballistic missile standpoint to be able to reach the United States. And that is where I think a lot of our government would consider it an existential threat and something we need to worry about. Now, I also think it's important to point out that we have grown our presence in the Middle East significantly in those same decades, which, just like if Iran had a carrier group off the coast of California, we wouldn't be crazy about it. If China decided to throw up an air base in Tijuana, it's probably not going to blow our feathers back, and we're not going to be crazy about it either. The catch, though, is, being, excuse me, in that region, while I understand they're not happy about it, I would ask, does that warrant attacking our troops, specifically in Iraq? There was a mountain of evidence showing electric form penetrator IEDs that were capable of defeating most of our armored vehicles and killed countless American soldiers. Very, very provable that Iran was behind that. We did nothing about it then. I don't think that we should have done nothing about it then. That's another story. Now, the big question that I think we have to ask ourselves as a nation is kind of a several part question, which is, does their attacking us warrant the type of response that we're doing now? Does the intelligence that the United States has gathered over the years show, prove, dictate, and warrant the level of aggression that we're showing as we speak? Those are tough questions. Part of the problem is that as the public, we don't have access to most of the intelligence, right? And I understand that it's not just wanting to keep America in the dark. There's probably some of that involved. There's also an element of being able to reverse engineer that if, any potential enemy of yours now knows that you have intelligence, it's fairly easy for them to reverse engineer it and understand how you got it, which burns your methodology of being able to do that. I do understand that. And I also think it's important to point out, that whatever that intelligence is, I hope that it's shared with Congress. Doesn't sound like it has been, or at least not to the degree with which a lot of them are satisfied. But I also think it's important to give the current administration the benefit of the doubt when I look at the track record of, I would say, a lack of hawkishness, generally speaking, compared to a number of predecessors. That's not to say that there's no hawkishness. There's for sure some of it. The big question is what we're doing. Is it justified? Is it warranted? That's a tough question to answer, primarily because I haven't seen the intelligence, and I would ascertain that most people watching haven't either. And some people are really upset that we've gone the route that we have. Some people think it's the right amount. Some people don't think it's enough. Without being able to see the intelligence that's put forth, it's very difficult to have a succinct or hardline opinion on whether or not it was the right call. Now, I will say their ability to possess a nuclear weapon, is it our job, responsibility, or frankly our right to dictate to them whether or not they deserve to have one? Again, that's also a tough call. Do I want Iran to have a nuclear missile or nuclear capability, rather? No. Does that mean, though, that because we don't want that and we're convinced that they'll use it on us, that it justifies us going in and striking them to the degree with which we have? And keep in mind, as I'm recording this, it's within the first 24 hours of the strike starting. Sounds like dozens of the regime's leadership are dead, including the Ayatollah, as I mentioned. And, those are pretty serious acts, and again, they're all tough questions that to say we're bombing them because they have this nuclear capacity, it is more complicated than that. What for me, I think further complicates things is that I think that there have been a number of justifications for doing what we're doing now that have happened over these decades that we didn't do anything about. That's the part that troubles me a little bit. When our troops are attacked in Iraq, when our boats are attacked in the Gulf, when there's cyber attacks, that there's things where American lives are being taken directly by the hands of Iran, and we don't do anything about that. We don't justify the strikes that we're doing now back then because of that. I do have some heartburn with that. Does that mean that it's okay to do what we're doing now and you lump it all in together and say, hey, it's all collective and it's the straw that broke the camel's back? I don't know. What I am encouraged by is the fact that there's little resistance. There seems to be a significant amount of support, by the Iranian people. And we haven't put any ground troops in harm's way. Obviously, we've put pilots to a certain extent. All of the troops that are forward deployed in that region, we've put them, obviously in harm's way by doing what we're doing. What I don't think would be a justified action would be to full scale, full stop, go in the way that we went into Iraq. And I hope and pray that the current administration has learned that hard lesson from both Iraq and Afghanistan, that, by essentially cutting the head off the snake and kind of allowing conditions to where the Iranian people can rise up and take control of their country in the way that they see fit and not have us try to dictate to them, what type of government should be set up or who's in place. I hope that that's the case. I also hope that it doesn't turn out the same way Libya, Syria, Egypt have gone, because during the Obama years, the Arab Spring, there was kind of a similar thought process, and it'd be tough to argue that went well. So these are all tough decisions that I wanted to get on here and at least give the context and ask some of these questions and say, here's kind of how I see it, and I hope other people think about those things, ask those questions. And for people who are either for it or against it, I hope that before you jump on, whether it's social media or whatever circles you run in, and just have this super hard line approach, that you think about A, the context of the last 40 years, B, the strikes that have taken place from the Iranian government on American forces and interests over those decades, and C, does the intelligence that we have provide enough justification from a existential threat to the United States via a nuclear weapon capability to justify what we're doing? Those are all questions that are questions and perspectives that I think should be considered and thought about before anybody rushes to judgment. I would have liked to have seen more of a buy-in from Congress, frankly, and there's people that would argue that Trump is well within his rights from an executive power standpoint to do what he's doing. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I don't know. To me, it kind of reminds me of that adage when, you hear law enforcement talk about, or attorneys talk about, there's what's right, there's what's wrong, and then there's what's legal. And to me, whether it's legal or not, I still, if it were me, I would want to kind of get a decent sign off from the other elected officials who represent the entire collective country. I would have liked to have seen that taken place to a much higher degree than it did. Again, without being able to see the intelligence, who's to say, how close they are or not, what their intentions are or not. To be fair, I've heard since 1996 via Israel that they're weeks away from obtaining the technology and developing a nuclear weapon. It's 30 years ago. They still haven't shown that capacity or capability in doing so. So, again, it's a fair question. And I think, and what I would like to see is our society as a whole is having these discussions and talking through these things versus just the second it starts happening, taking a super hard line approach and just MFing the other side on both sides, and ask ourselves these questions and have, even if it's a spirited debate, have some debate and not just go right into, blaming the other side, either saying you're justified or it's totally illegal, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my take on it. Maybe you hear this and you summarize, well, that's not much of a take. The biggest takeaway I hope everybody got is what I summarized at the end, is that I think it's important to look at both sides. I think you've got to ask yourself some of those reasonable questions, and you've got to hold both parties to account in all of these situations. I hope that there aren't any ground troops that go in. I hope that it's, a civilian casualty and collateral damage free or really close to that scenario, and it's just a matter of days before there's a total collapse of the current regime, which seems like that was the intended goal. Again, whether or not it was our right to do so is a completely different discussion, but it does seem like that was a big part of the goal. But what's going to happen after that? I don't want to see a vacuum of power and have the current regime replaced with a 2.0 that's as bad or worse. Take Al-Qaeda being, largely decimated in Iraq, and ISIS takes its place and is arguably worse. I really hope and pray that that doesn't happen in Iran. My thoughts, my prayers, my heart goes out to the Iranian people. I hope that they take this opportunity and make their country a way better place than it seems like it's become. And I'm just hoping for the best. So if I've gotten this totally wrong and I have no idea what I'm talking about, I know you guys will let me know. What did I get wrong? What haven't I considered? Am I looking at this totally biased from a former warfighter standpoint? They're all important questions that I'm certainly fair game to be asked as well. But I would love to get your guys' take on what you think is going on, if you think it's justified, if you do, why, if you don't, why it's not. And have some civil discourse in the comment section without being a total dick about it. Mic drop solo. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you in the comment section.